You met the noted novelist yesterday. Find out why he had 7 rewrites on his new book, The Majority Rules, on this morning's Carolina People. Good morning. Welcome to Carolina People. This morning we're at the Fox 43 studio. We're on day 2 of the focus on the new political thriller, The Majority Rules. And we're visiting with its author, Chief Judge Eugene Sullivan of the D.C. area. Good morning, Chief Judge Sullivan.
It's good to be here in the Carolinas. Lovely weather, beautiful scenery, and even nicer people.
Absolutely, and to get you back for day 2 is a treat. You know, it's amazing to think, and earlier this week to have had the opportunity to have your predecessor, Chief Judge Robinson Everett, in on Monday, and obviously on Tuesday, the time with the two of you all talking about the Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces, as well as so many things in the federal judiciary, and then to spend a little bit of time yesterday focusing on the early stages of the majority rules, and to know you'll be with us tomorrow as well is a real treat. So we wanted to have an opportunity real quick about yourself, Chief Judge Sullivan. Are you originally from the area?
Well, I'm a St. Louis boy. My father was a policeman, and I went to West Point, and after West Point I became a soldier and served my country in Vietnam. And then from there I went to law school. I got out of the Army and went to Georgetown Law. After law school, I clerked for a federal judge, like myself, and then I became with a Washington, D.C. law firm, much like the law firm in the book, I might add.
Right.
But you write what you know. Mm-hmm. And after I was at the firm for a couple of years, I got the opportunity to be on the losing side of United States versus Nixon. I was one of Nixon's attorneys. I worked for Jim St. Clair. There were 9 of us most of the time who worked on the defense of the president.
Is that right?
And when my client suddenly left town on the 9th of August, 1974, I was out of a job. And then I wanted to get some experience as a trial attorney and prosecutor, so I went to the Justice Department.
Right.
I stayed there 8 years. When President Reagan came into town, they were looking for some combat Vietnam veterans to be in the Pentagon, and so I was selected to be first deputy and later general counsel of the Air Force.
Is that right?
I had a little secret job on the side there, and we can get into that later.
Yeah, we want to get into that in a minute. What was that like? Think back to '74. You know, when you think of all the pressure being put on all the attorneys, obviously everyone innocent until proven guilty, but there's a heck of a lot of efforts that go into that. What was that like?
Well, it was almost overwhelming. We worked 7 hours a day. I mean, 7 days a week, and many times we pulled all-nighters.
Oh, yeah.
We were arrayed against. There were about 10 of us. 9 working for Jim St. Clair, who was the special counsel to President Nixon, and against us we had over 100 attorneys in the special prosecutor's office, Jaworski. Over 100 attorneys in the House Judiciary trying to impeach the president,
right,
to include Hillary Rodham was on the other side. And then we had 33 attorneys working on the Senate impeachment staff.
So 230 some, more or less, going against the 9.
Then add another 20 attorneys for the private attorneys, so we were outnumbered. We did mostly react. But we tried to serve the president and the office of the president.
Mm-hmm. And serving the office of the president oftentimes is as big as any, I mean, you know, even bigger than that individual, to keep it's much like what we'll talk a little bit more about later this morning as well as tomorrow, the role of judges and the judiciary and the respect and the potential lack of respect at times, even in the recent past. Well,
the Watergate experience really was a crucible for me, and it was hard, but it was very worthwhile. I learned a lot from Jim St. Clair and from the fellow attorneys, and from the other side, you're fighting a battle from all sides teaches you how to be a good warrior.
Right.
And I think my background as a ranger and Vietnam vet helped me.
Sure. Have you all ever gotten together as the group, the 9 of you all in Sinclair, or any who are still, I'm sure most are probably still living. Have you all gotten together?
Well, let's see. We've had 4 deaths of the group. 3 of us became federal judges. Judge Mac Howard in North Carolina.
Absolutely.
Federal District Court judge, and Judge Lauren Smith. With the U.S. Court of Federal Claims in Washington, D.C. And the 3rd federal judge that came out of that group was myself, and I feel lucky.
How fascinating. How fascinating. You know, it's so exciting yesterday to get into the majority rules. Can you give the viewers a sense, without giving it all away, a little bit of the plot summary of the book, so that obviously for folks who were with us yesterday, it's a rehash, but for folks who may have missed yesterday's interview?
Well, it's a political thriller. It tries to keep the people turning the pages, but it teaches you a little bit about Washington, D.C. and how it works. The other thing it teaches you is a little bit about judges. A lot of the legal thrillers out now, all the action takes place in front of the bench. In the majority rules, this book that I'm very proud of, you see the action unfolding from the view of a federal judge. And that perspective is different. And I think it's educational for people.
So now when you say the federal judge, you mean Tim Quinn soon as the book begins, when he's both nominated and approved?
Yes. There's a death on the bench, and a vacancy is created on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. Everything is realistic in there. And we have a protagonist, Tim Quinn. He tries to get on the bench and goes through a chancy political confirmation process, much like we see today.
Right.
And you see the flaws in there, by the way. And then he gets to the bench. Once he's on the bench, he sees that there's something funny. It looks like the White House is influencing some cases, and it looks like maybe a powerful attorney has an unseen edge on some cases. And that grates on him, and he starts an investigation. Eventually pulls in to help him a prosecutor from the Justice Department, Vicky Hauser.
Right.
And I made a strong male character and a strong female character because, I don't know if you knew this, but 70% of the buyers of fiction are female.
Is that right?
In America and England and in Ireland, to my knowledge. That means that there should be a strong female character in the book. So people can identify with it, especially the way I write.
Right.
I write it by envisionalizing each chapter as a little movie scene and getting the appearances, the atmospherics, and the dialogue down in a little movie in my mind, and then I'll write that chapter. So a lot of the book comes from a female perspective through this professional prosecutor, Vicky Hauser. Now, as a reality check, in order to get that right, I used my wife, Lise Sullivan, and she was a big help in telling me the female viewpoint and being a tough editor on that to make sure I got it so women could identify with Vicky Hauser.
Right. So the goal wasn't to get a woman in there to sell more books. The goal was to get a woman in there so that many of the readers, 70% of the readers, would actually identify with one of the key characters.
That was my goal. This is a novel that people, because of the visually way I envision the book and then I write it, I want people to walk in the steps of the Judge Tim Quinn, the hero, and the heroine, Vicky Hauser. and I want you to follow them through the twists and turns and through the education. This book will teach you about how the way Washington works. It'll teach you a little bit about the spying game, and it'll teach you about judges.
Oh, yeah.
Judges are not superhuman. They're very ordinary people thrust into superhuman responsibility sometimes, as we've seen.
As we've seen recently. You know, it's so fascinating doing a little research on the book prior to you flying down, Chief Judge Sullivan. It's amazing to see the number of stores that y'all have gotten the book distributed, to see all the Barnes & Nobles, Borders, Books A Million, for our viewers in the PD or southeastern North Carolina, to know they could, if there's not a Borders or Barnes & Noble, there's a Walmart oftentimes in their town, to know that it's in all the Walmarts. I saw back on, I think it was April 16th, you were to the Walmart there in Fairfax doing book signings, and that Walmart's really heavily promoting the majority rules.
Yes, the books in a lot of stores, independent bookstores, and in Target as well.
Target.
Some of the bigger chain stores have taken it, as well as you can go online, Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com, Books A Million. Some of the even on eBay, you can get my book on eBay.
If a viewer was to visit EugeneSullivan.com, which is the author's website, what would they find on there? A little info about the book as well as info about you, or?
Well, they'll find some of the criticisms, or in this case, praise for the book. I'm very fortunate. Some very influential people have endorsed it, and they'll also find sort of a plot summary, and then a bio of myself.
Right.
And then on the last page, they can find where they can buy the books just by clicking on it. So if they go to www.eugenesullivan.com, on the last page, they can just click on Amazon or booksamillion.com, and it comes to them right through the mail.
I'll tell you another fascinating website that I visited that had a lot of references to you was gavelconsultinggroup.com. Can you share with the viewers a little about Gavel Consulting Group? I was fascinated to visit that just a couple nights ago.
Well, when I retired from the bench, I decided not to join a large law firm, but to start a small judicial consulting group. And I was very fortunate in getting some former federal judges. We're all former federal judges.
Right.
And occasionally we'll help out people on cases. We don't advertise much. Gavel Consulting Group is our website. One of our primary things we do is twice a year we'll go down to Quantico, and 2 or 3 of us will go down and we teach a class to the new agents in training at the FBI Academy on how to testify in court in an effective way from a judge's viewpoint.
Wow.
And so it's pro bono. We enjoy doing that. We want to help these FBI agents hit the ground running.
Well, I saw there was also a board of business advisors oftentimes to be taken into account. I guess there would be some instances where everything doesn't have to be done pro bono. Hopefully there'll be some opportunities where some of the members of the group could also team up with some of your business advisors to help some of the corporate America, oftentimes under the gun, to get through some of their tough scrutiny.
Well, we've helped some large and small corporations. We don't really do legal work. We look at the legal work that needs to be done, and we tell them ahead of time. Perhaps we give them our prediction of how their case would turn out, and that's helpful for them to decide whether to settle a case or whether to litigate it. We also give them advice to avoid litigation. And several of our successes that I'm proud of, we've helped small companies doing business with the government we've helped them with problems of misunderstanding between their company and the government. In one case, in particular, this company was completely being mistreated by the government, not intentionally, but just by accident. We came in, we investigated it, we gave our results to the government agency, and they reconsidered and changed their mind.
Great. Great. The consulting, obviously, the importance of that could be critical. And I saw that a number of the judges surely had to do things pro bono, made every effort. And it sounds like all of you all are very interested in helping folks out.
Well, we are, especially the small corporation that gets in, just doesn't know where to turn to.
Right.
And a lot of things can be solved without litigation. Litigation is very expensive. We also do focus groups for the large corporation already in litigation, to tell them either to moot court their lawyers or to tell them, give them strategic advice.
Sure. Well, I would encourage viewers to take a look at gavelconsultinggroup.com just to see some of the information. It's fascinating litany of judges associated there. Let's share real quick, if you don't mind, talking about the experience there from 82 to 86. We talked about first deputy counsel and then later general counsel, United States Air Force, and I think you said 1,700 attorneys yesterday. But there was another fascinating thing that happened while you were serving in that position. Can you share with the viewers a little about the NRO?
Well, I was appointed by the Reagan administration to be the deputy, the number 2 man in the general counsel's office, the deputy general counsel of the Air Force. And I came over from the 8 years in the Justice Department as a trial attorney and prosecutor to do that job. And a couple of weeks after I've been there, 2 men came in my office, Mr. Smith and Mr. Jones. I forget their names, but it was like a visit from the Men in Black.
No.
Only they didn't have sunglasses on. And it was very strange. One said, Mr. Sullivan, may I close the door? And I said, sure. I was here in the Pentagon, protected by, lots of people, and I figured that it was safe to do that. And one of them said, we would like you to be the general counsel of our government agency. And I said, well, I've already the deputy general counsel of the Air Force. I love the job. And the secretary of the Air Force and the general counsel of the Air Force, I'm sure they would object to me, leaving.
Right.
And he says, you don't have to leave. He says, we just need you part-time for our agency. And I said, and we checked with both those people, and it's okay. Intrigued, I said, well, what's the name of your agency? And they said, we can't tell you.
Oh, come on.
And then I said, what do you do? And they said, we can't tell you.
Oh, come on.
And so I was going to, dismiss this whole thing as sort of a strange incident. And then they said something that appealed to my background. I'm a West Pointer. I'm a Vietnam veteran. I served my country in the federal government for over 38 years. And so they said, we will help protect the national security. And so I said, well, I said, I'm intrigued. And I said, this won't affect my work here. And I said, no, you can do it part-time. You can work 80% of the Air Force and 20% with our agency. It's all been approved above you. And so I said, okay, I'll do it. What's the name of your agency? And they said, well, we'll have to clear you first. And that took another 6 weeks. And they came back and told me I'd been cleared. And then we drove to an undisclosed location, which I can't talk about, and was told I was the general counsel of the National Reconnaissance Office. Now, for your viewers who have seen Enemy of the State with Will Smith and Gene Hackman, this is the super spy agency, top secret, deep secret agency that designs, builds, launches, operates, and disseminates the information from all the spy satellites.
So there are quite a few.
Oh, I can't tell you how many, but yes. Our nation leads the world in spy satellites, and we have the best. I can tell you that. Wow. And it's a big organization, and I served almost for 5 years as their general counsel.
Is that right? It
was so secret that I had to sign documents that I wouldn't tell anybody, because from 1959 to 1992, when President Clinton declassified the agency, it didn't exist. The National Reconnaissance Office. I couldn't say the word NRO, and if I did, it was a criminal violation. I couldn't even tell my wife that I had another job. And I write about it a little bit in this novel, The Majority Rules, but it was a fascinating organization. I enjoyed my work for it. For those viewers that are interested, they can go to www.nro.gov and find out how America has a very fine intelligence organization that is looking out for their national security.
How is it funded if no one knew about it? Where'd the money come from?
There's a secret portion of in the old days of the federal budget. I can't tell you where it was buried, but it was buried, and it was big. It was real big. That financed the making of satellites from scratch and launching them.
So then all the congressmen and senators would be aware of it, but they couldn't talk about it.
I don't think all congressmen and senators were aware of it. I know there were some aware of it, the ones that had to authorize and appropriate the money for this agency. But it was a very controlled number of people. I compare it to the Enigma machine during World War II. The people in England had the intelligence organization that had access to one of the German cipher machines.
Right.
And it was very controlled. They disseminated the information, but they disguised where it was coming from.
Mm-hmm. That is fascinating. Well, thank you for sharing that with us, and obviously that helps give all of us a little insight as to where the majority rules, some of the background of how you came up with it, and of course, critical question, and we've only got a couple of minutes today. We'll have, hopefully you'll be willing to come back tomorrow.
Yeah.
Critical question, how does one go about writing a book?
Okay, now you've asked a question I think is very important to everyone. It's my belief that almost everyone has at least one book in them, whether it's a novel or memoir or just them telling their life story. It's inside of them. And so getting it out is the big thing. And for me, this book took almost 5 years to write.
Is that right?
And it was rewritten 7 times. The first thing you have to do is you have an idea, follow it faithfully, outline. How I did it, I outlined it, and then I followed it through to the end. And I came up with a book. Now, the second big thing you have to do is get an agent. I think if you send it off to a publishing company, sometimes it will just get thrown in the trash. That's my belief, my personal view. I think it's more important for you to get an agent. I went to 3 agents and was rejected 3 times.
Is that right?
But each time I was rejected by an agent, I called the agent up and I said, thank you for looking at my book. Can I talk to your reader? And the reader will tell, I got constructive criticism.
Right.
And that helped me rewrite the book. I kept rewriting it until I found an agent who loved the book, and he sold it to an imprint of St. Martin's Press, Forge Press, and it was published.
So a critical part is getting an agent. I guess even more critical is getting a good agent, one that's going to fight for you.
Yes, your agent has to believe in the book, and they have to have credibility with these publishing companies. They have to be able to go in and say, listen, I gave you a good book last year or 2 months ago, and you made you money. This is a book that's going to make you money, and I put my approval behind it. And that's tough. So your agent has to believe in you, or else they're not going to waste their time using up their credibility with a publisher. I'm fortunate that Frank Wyman of the literary group in New York City believed in me enough to sell it. The editor over at Forge Press, Brian Thompson, believed in the book, and he's been my editor.
Well, we definitely want to get into character development and some of the aspects there, and obviously doing an outline must be a heck of a chore. I mean, actually going through the outline itself, Is it the entire book you outline or just chapter to chapter?
I outline a chapter to chapter throughout the entire book, and it took me about 6 months, part-time, just having an idea, and then I would jot it down, and where the plot's going to go and the different subplots. And I kept working on that for about 6 months, and then once I had it set, I started to write.
Okay. Chief Judge Sullivan, we are out of time. We're going to have to get you back tomorrow. Of course, yesterday was a treat. Tomorrow will be even better, wrapping up the week with you, if you'd be willing to come back.
I love the Carolinas, and it's great to be here. I'll be here, so I'll be on your set.
Okay, great. Thanks so much for being with us this morning. Stay tuned to more Carolina People with Chief Judge Eugene Sullivan coming up next. Judges are the focus of a lot of attention these days. Having been a federal judge for more than 15 years, Chief Judge Sullivan's got a heck of a lot of insight into what was happening in the murders in Atlanta and in Chicago, the family in Chicago, to think about that aspect, as well as the filibustering of the federal judges in Washington right now. There's a heck of a lot going on in America, a lot more focus that we can get into. Come back tomorrow for part 3 of Chief Judge Eugene Sullivan and the Majority Rules.